Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back here to today's edition of Intuitive Angling, and really appreciate you guys coming by the channel to spend some time with me on the video. And got a good one for y'all today that I think is really going to help you guys catch a lot more fish. We're going to be talking about the size of lure, exactly the lure profile, the lure length, lure size that bass prefer different months out of the year, because there is a definite preference that fish have for seasonal movements and patterns, and not necessarily about going to a small bait's going to catch small fish and going to a big bait's going to catch big fish. It's not that simple. There's a lot of factors into that, and I'm going to explain to you guys in today's video the best size of lure to use in each month of the year, so we'll get into that. Also, guys, one quick reminder, just like to invite everybody to please hit that subscribe button here at Intuitive Angling if you're inclined to do so. Be much appreciated. We're really trying to hit that 150,000 subscriber mark. And also, guys, please check out my Blaukat's Corner page on Tackle Warehouse. This is a page that I have on Tackle Warehouse that every month I go over the best lures for that month with a correlating video. So I'll link that in the description of this video if you guys would like to check that out, and really appreciate it. Okay, one of the things that you're going to find out about bass is that seasonally, based upon factors like water temperature, water clarity, time of year, daylight hours, fishing pressure, there's a wide range of variables. Bass prefer a certain size lure, and we're talking about just all sizes of bass, not just big bass or small bass or in between, but overall the general population of bass at certain times of the year, they're more conducive to hit certain types of lures. So I sort of want to walk you guys through the seasons with that and explain to you why. Okay, first of all, let's talk about the winter time of the year. For most part, once that water temperature starts getting cold and it starts bottoming out, say for example, your water temperature, the coldest it gets is 45 degrees. So we're talking about the winter period, 5 degrees either side of that. So if you have whatever your lowest temperature is, just add 5 degrees to that. And normally, for the most part, that's in the months of December, January, February, sometime into March is your coldest weather months. You're going to find out that when the water's cold, and I don't care if the water is dirty or clear or whatever, of course most people don't fish dirty water when it's cold, but in the wintertime the bass like smaller lure profiles. That's why you're going to do a lot better. If you go to more of a downsized finesse jerk bait over a full size one, you're going to do better. If you go to a swim bait, your little 2.5 and 3 inch swim baits are going to work better than the 4 or 5 inch long swim baits. Any lure category out there, you're going to do better on small baits. Even like on an Alabama rig, you're going to do better using little small swim baits. Again, it's something just about the mood and the personality of the fish, and we can theorize what that is, why they prefer smaller ones, but it remains a mystery to some extent. But I do know from fishing for 50 years that there's a definite trend to fish wanting a little bit smaller lures in the wintertime. Now I'm not talking about super small lures, but just a downsized presentation. Now that begins to change as the water temperature rises, and one of the things that you're going to notice, and you've heard me talk about this a little bit if you followed the channel over the last couple weeks, is once you get into March, when you start to have daylight hours getting a little bit longer, it's not quite getting quite so cold at night, we're getting closer to getting to the spawn. There's this annual cycle that occurs every year. Once that water temperature slowly starts creeping up consistently. Now, that's the key word, consistently, because you can have periods of warm weather, like in the wintertime, that are sort of fake warm, because maybe it's warm for 4 or 5 days and then you get knocked down with a real bad Arctic cold front or something. But in March, usually, you have consistency of warming, where that water's warming up, a degree or so a week. Or whatever. This transition occurs once that water temperature starts to get into the 50s. In other words, once that water temperature starts to get about 7 to 10 degrees above its coldest point in the winter, there's a huge shift in the size of lures that bass prefer. And this is the time of year, in my opinion, that they like really big lures. This is when you're going to catch the most fish on the biggest lures of any month out of the year. So in March, I like to use big lures, like big spinner baits, big 3/4 and 1 ounce spinner baits, full size jigs, larger swim baits, glide baits. I go upsize my Alabama egg size swim baits. And a lot of this has to do with the bass are actively feeding, they're getting ready to spawn, they need to build up their energy reserves, are a little bit more aggressive. And that's why you're going to need to use a little bit bigger lures during the pre-spawn period. Now, once the fish start spawning and they start focusing on spawning, which is normally when that water temperature starts to get around 60 to 70 degrees for the most part, the lure profile and categories change a little bit. The bass, once they start spawning, these fish don't like to chase much. They like bottom type lures and they like smaller lures. So when those fish are really focused on getting ready to spawn, that's when stuff like your wacky rigs work good, your shaky heads can be really good, a little tiny Ned rig can be good, pitching a Texas rig creature bait or a lizard. So there's a diversity of different lure sizes, although I would classify the spawn as sort of a medium size lure category. You're not using these tiny little lures aside from something like a Ned rig, but at the same time you might go fishing and you might catch a fish on a little Ned rig in April, and then you might catch a fish on an 8-inch lizard, which even though it's 8 inches long, it's still not a big lure profile, it's a small profile. But the overall theme is once you start getting into, the post-spawn and the spawn, is they like sort of a diversity of different lures. Now this continues over into the what I consider the late post-spawn into the early summer. So from about mid-May into really July or something like that, this diversity of lure size works pretty good, and it's sort of in the mid-range. So in other words, your baits like your swim jigs work good, various top waters like walking top waters. You could have like a super spook or a little popper can work good. Deep diving crankbaits can work good. There's a wide range of things that could work based upon the type of lake that you have and the cover that's predominant. So once that water temperature hits about 60 degrees, from the point that it gets about 60 degrees up to it gets about 80 degrees in the middle of the summer, a lot of different stuff works in the mid-range. I don't normally use a lot of small baits during that time of year, but again, I don't use a lot of really big baits or just sort of mid-range baits. Now there's another shift in this. This goes on for quite a while until you start getting into what we call the dog days of summer or early fall. Now once you start getting into late summer and early fall, there's another shift that occurs. Now, a lot of this has to do with the fact that shad and perch are spawning all year long. So if you figure you've got bluegills and you got shad spawning all year, you've got a wide range of different sizes of bait fish, but there tends to be a lot of really small bait fish in the summertime because the perch and the shad spawn every couple months or every month in the summertime. So there's a definite trend once you start getting into late August and September back to the small lures. Now this is the time of year that I like to use some of my smallest lures. Little bitty tiny crankbaits can be good. Little bitty 1/8 ounce buzz baits can be good. 4-inch pitching and flipping like a little tube or a 4-inch worm. Just some type of a downsize offering, because this is sort of the toughest time of year. If you look at it throughout the seasons, I think that like late August into sort of like the end of September, maybe the first part of October, probably some of the toughest fishing of the entire year, because you got fish scattered everywhere. You got some fish deep, you got fish suspended, you got some fish shallow, you got some fish in between. But overall, bait fish are small and they prefer a little bit smaller lures. Now this changes again. There's one final change that occurs in the mid to late fall, and that's when you start getting into a little bit larger lures, a little bit more of a diversity. Once that water temperature starts falling again in the fall time of the year, you can catch them on a wide range of different lures, but they tend to prefer a little bit larger lures, like again a big 1/2 ounce buzz bait, a big full profile buzz bait, 3-inch long square bills. This is a really good time of year to catch them on a bigger glide bait. So a lot of guys that fish those 6 and 7-inch glide baits and 6 and 7-inch swim baits, this is a really good time to fish them. Those full size walking baits like a super spook, larger spinner baits, it just seems like maybe they're going back to the bigger baits because they're feeding up for winter, whatever it is. But that's sort of the cycle, guys. small in the winter time, large in early spring, mid-size for, you know, up until the summertime, and that back down in the early fall for small, then back again big. That's sort of like the evolution that I have seen in my fishing. So anyway, guys, hope it helps out. We'll talk later.